Welcome, everybody, of course, to the Secure Code Summit. Getting started here with our pre-show banter. And I want to ask a question to not just the panel, but the community as well. So if you are in Zoom or if you are in Discord, I'm curious for everybody here, when you think of, secure code, what comes to mind? And Tim had earlier when I asked this question, he had a really, really good kind of comment when we were going back and forth, bantering in our pre-show banter about secure code. There is none. Yeah, JD50 says
No, that's not what I said.
It's not a
there's
thing.
no
I said it's mythical.
mythical. I like that. And Dale had I think like the top comment though, when he thinks of secure code. What was it that you think of when you think of people doing
Uh,
secure code, Dale?
Alcoholics and heroin junkies.
Just sitting in the corner trying to figure out what the heck they're doing.
No, trying to figure out how to get through the day and make the business happy while still getting their code out.
Right.
Yeah. Tim, you had like a great kind of like the whole thing about the secure code. Do you remember what you said by
Not at
chance?
all.
I
Not at
figured you
all.
Remember those
wouldn't. I
things.
figured, no.
Well, I mean, essentially, well, the thing that when someone says secure code, from my perspective, it kind of implies a couple of things. First is that it's going to be secure by design, and the question I have is, when did you start thinking about that security? Before you wrote
As
the
soon
code?
as it was breached.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because like, let's be honest, like if we wrote bad code to start with, so we're going to quickly hot patch our bad code with hopefully less bad code. Microsoft is a good example of how many times have they had to roll back their KBs because their fix for a vulnerability was a vulnerability. And so like this concept of secure code, and I kind of joke that I think it's kind of mythical. It's not. It could in theory be achieved, but it starts at the very beginning of the process. The problem is, as everybody else alluded to, it's like, hey, do we take the time to do this well and do this right? Or do we meet our business objectives? Because in almost all cases, those are
Or the
mutually
thing that makes us
exclusive.
money.
Yeah. And we'll just fix it in prod, or nobody will ever like that. This condition will never be met, that this vulnerability could be exploited. The never happens a lot. And so across the board, we've got to do better. But I'm guilty. I've wrote some very insecure code. And I have to eat
So,
my own dog food. Like
so,
slow
so,
down, do it right.
so
I
Tim, by that definition, then would you say that most business objective is to get breached?
Yes. Wait, no. What? Oh, what's the
Wait,
question?
wait, their objective is to get breached?
I That's a trick question for a
Yeah.
pen
One of the
testing firm.
business units' hidden goals for the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys are all pen testers up here on the panel. So do you guys worried as like secure coding practices evolve, it's going to make your jobs harder?
No.
No.
Why is
So, and
that?
I want to add some more context around that. Let's say hypothetically, we wrote the most secure code possible today, right? You had all of the best people in the world look at it, and all of them said, "Yay, verily, this is secure code." And you take that code and you dropped it into, let's say, a time machine, right? You froze it, and then you come back 6 years from now and you unlock that code. That code is completely effed all the way through. And that's why whenever we're thinking about secure code, we all have different views of this, but my view of it is it's a constant process, right? Secure code is like practicing a religion. It's like practicing a sport. It's like practicing an instrument. You are constantly doing it. There's just no way you're ever going to get stuff that's completely secure. And that's, kind of getting what Tim was talking about. Boy, you look at some of these large companies that have tons and tons and tons of apps that they're responsible for. And then they have those legacy applications. Because seriously, Microsoft, there is code inside of Microsoft Windows 11 that is code that is left over from, like, what do you think? Windows 95? At least Windows 2000, right? So you have all of this legacy code that you're trying to bundle up and keep going. And I think that is an incredibly difficult challenge. And I think it just comes back to it's a process.
Yeah. I think I saw something even I saw something recently. I didn't read the whole bulletin they put out on it of the White House trying to get people to push away from certain programming languages like C, C++, things like that. And they had a whole like long technical report as to why these things need to be moved away from in the industry completely as coding languages. And you can vary your degree of their level of understanding as to why it's good or why it's bad, depending on how that
Well,
report really reads. But
so and that's kind of like SZA and things like that. And this is
yeah,
probably shit that's going to get me in trouble. So I'll just jump straight in. Um, I've been around long enough that I remember when people were like, everybody should use Java because Java doesn't have security vulnerabilities, right? And that has to do with the way it handles certain things like memory allocation. Like if you're writing something in C, you're doing all of your own memory management, and that creates a lot of issues when you're coding something in C. But if you need something that's running fast, you're going to be coding in C, right? So we went through this cycle where it was like, okay, nobody should be using these coding languages. Everyone should be using Java. We should be using bytecode interpreted languages. Should be using Python because they're going to be more secure because you don't have to worry about memory management because it's going to handle it completely for you. And oh my God, there's tons of vulnerabilities in Java. You still have vulnerabilities and things that are using in Python. And I anytime anyone is standing up and saying, oh, well, we're all going to use Rust or we're going to use Golang or we're going to use whatever hipster language is out there, I always go back to like going back 25 years ago, where it's like everybody should be using Java because it's going to handle all these things for us and there's going to be no security vulnerabilities. And oh my God, we were horribly, horribly wrong. I'm not trying to develop kind of a moral equivalence with coding languages and saying, well, they all suck, so it just doesn't matter what you use. There are definitely languages that are far, far, far better for someone that isn't quite as advanced in their craft in coding to use because it provides a much better sandbox for you not to hurt yourself in that coding language. So that's great. And I think it's wonderful. And I think that we should definitely be doing that. But the reality of the entire universe is the vast majority of Microsoft Windows and Linux is written in C. The vast majority of a lot of real-time processing languages are written in C. It's just, it's not a matter of like tomorrow, all of a sudden, everything's going to be Rust and everything's going to be secure.
mm-hmm.
How do
Yeah, and
you
I mean, I've been out of school for a long time now, so I don't know what's happened in universities and what's changed in the last, even within the last 5 or 10 years. But when I was going through school and we were doing programming classes and things like that, the concept of coding securely was not something that was actually even discussed. It was, here's how you build something so that a company will hire you, so that a product can generate revenue. It was about creating things, not necessarily worrying about whether or not those things were built securely.
Chris, I think that's probably part of the problem is that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The textbooks are the same for the most part.
Yeah, they're still using COBOL.
And that's what I'm building towards is, all of the seasoned senior professionals out there now, the people that are doing a huge amount of the lifting at these organizations and writing these pieces of software is they didn't get formal training in securing code well, right? They're left to come to summits and get training classes on their own most of the time. They try to figure out, how do I do this and how do I do it well? So I don't think that this is a problem that is going to be solved ever, really, but even in the short term to get better.
Well, and Chris, I kind of want to riff on that a little bit. We've got you, Dale, Tim. I know there's the people I can see. People that do testing all the time. We've got Kurt. We've got lots of people in the security realm, right? I think when we're looking at certain classes of bugs like buffer overflows, we don't see buffer overflows at the rate that we did 15 years ago. Those are almost squashed to extinction. I said almost. I know there's going to be some a-hole that's like, oh, well, there's actually one that came out last week. I get that. But all of the vulnerabilities used to be buffer overflows. Then we had some format string vulnerabilities, which are far more difficult to exploit, dealing with the way format strings and string copy works. And a lot of those have been reduced because that's super easy, just by basically going against the ANSI C89 compiler standards and saying, okay, you need to check and see that there's the proper amount of arguments in your compiler. Then we get to heap vulnerabilities. And I think that we've gotten really good at squashing heap vulnerabilities. And a lot of those, every once in a while, there's some new heap feng shui type techniques that come out And, that's kind of cool. And those get squashed relatively quickly. Where I'm seeing most of the vulnerabilities when we're looking at secure code at Black Hills Information Security is the interoperability of different applications, where we have APIs that are communicating with each other and we're using libraries of functionality, and people don't even know what the capabilities of that library of functionality is. Do you guys kind of see that? Because I'm not testing on a daily basis anymore, but I'm reading the reports, and that's really what I'm seeing. And I think that that's the bigger concern, is we've gone away from this micro coding problem, right? Like buffer overflows. And now all of a sudden we're in interoperability, and we're setting up all of these different APIs, we're setting up gateways, we're communicating, and it is a lot of crap code that was thrown out very, very, very quickly, and we're making it work with other crap code. And I think that if we're looking at secure coding, it's almost like secure architecture and engineering. Or do you think I'm wrong? Do you think it still comes down to the code?
I think you're 100% right. I talked about this in our pre-show banter. It's like, we have all of these dependencies and interconnectivities and stuff. It's like we were talking about, the day and age of like dropping in an internal environment, firing up Metasploit, and just running ham for the most part is gone.
Yeah.
There are a few exceptions to that, as we have seen recently, but a lot of it comes down to being able to abuse either purposeful or unintentional configurations within these architectures and stuff like that. ADCS is a good example. Out of the box and stuff, it's not that it's a buffer overflow or anything like that. It's just a way everything was architected allows for these, inherent privilege escalations and stuff to take place with the default configurations. And that's what we're seeing so much of, especially like at the web app side of stuff. Like, there's, it's like, oh, it's a web app. Yeah, there's 14 different tiers of layers of software and technology stacks and everything, and going into like a basic web application. And a dependency issue, or an issue in one of those dependencies that you're not using, you're not leveraging it within your app, but if it's that vulnerability is discovered and it could be exploited, it could impact your entire application and stuff. And we've almost going back to the programming language with these high level language. Was the thing is, you have these layers of abstraction that, like, such as memory management, takes stuff. We've abstracted in some cases, especially in the web realm, too much that we don't actually have visibility as to what's going on under the hood across the board. Like, we know our app connects here, does this thing. But what else is that library doing? Where else is it calling out to? What is its dependencies and stuff? And so the idea of like secure code as secure architecture is a perfect analogy.
Yeah. And I think so. I do a lot of web apps, and I've spent a lot of time in them and stuff. I find I spend more and more time these days looking closer at authentication and authorization stuff than I do trying to find this random exploit CVE that exists in this buried library from 2 years ago because it's unpatched, and trying to see if that can be fully exploited to the nth degree, right? To me, secure coding doesn't just mean that you're patching to the latest stuff. It means that the things that you are using, the roles that you're putting in place, that you're verifying that they're only able to exercise a certain level of privilege within that web application. Right. Because even like on an internal for networks and stuff, we know that many attackers, they wind up getting their foothold, and then they move around using valid credentials. They got good credentials. So in a web app sense, if you can abuse authentication and authorization, it's the same mindset. You're in as a valid user, and then you can do more stuff.
I do kind of want to go back to one of the things Tim was talking about, because you're absolutely right, Chris. I mean, that's and I think a lot of what we're exploiting in environments about authorization, authentication, a lot of it has to do with the time scale that is allowed for a pen test, right? Like if somebody is like, you have 2 weeks, go. We're going to be focusing on those things. And to be honest, they're going to keep us damn busy for 2 weeks, and we're going to be successful in doing that. But going back to what Tim talked about, this is one of those things that's very concerning to me. And the presentation, I think Bradley is presenting. What time is Brad presenting, Zach?
Let me look real quick on the site.
Where we're looking now at, certain dynamic link libraries and the way that they load crypto libraries so we can actually gain access to various secrets that are provided. every once in a while, we get some time or we stumble on something where we start to look underneath the hood of all of these things that are foundational. And Tim, I want to get your opinion on this. I don't think that we got stuff secured completely at like the buffer overflow, the code level of the applications. It's just we've evolved so fast and we've thrown so much technology on top of so much technology that the low-hanging fruit for pen testers is going to be a lot of those easy things, and we're going to be scrambling just to keep up with those. But every once in a while, when you look under the hood, there's some terrifying new vulnerabilities, new classes of vulnerabilities that are still underneath that layer that has been abstracted upon.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And especially like some of the stuff that Bradley's been able to do with some of the DLL stuff, like that's been for us internally, that's a gift that's kept on giving. Because it's, looking at some of the implementations of the way we've done things historically, from they may be using secure encryption algorithms and stuff like that, but it's the implementation of things. And oftentimes we don't get the chance to look at those lower level stuff because we're time bound and various things like that. But when we do, it is amazing the things that we are able to uncover. Oftentimes what we find is that it's not in an isolated case. It's here, it's there, it's over there, it's over at this client, it's over there. Maybe because it's the same software vendor, or maybe because they look through the same Stack Overflow implementation guide on how to do X, Y, and Z, these various things like that. And so, we have gotten better, I think, as a whole, but we're still carrying all of this technical and legacy debt that we've done from the past because, everybody wants to be able to update infinitely on their current system or whatever like that, or always be able to run the latest version of software and stuff, which requires these backwards compatibility things. And I'm a big fan of backwards compatibility from a feature set stuff, but there's certain times where as developers and stuff, we got to go, no, we're not going to carry over this from the past because we've got to re-architect it. We've got to make better solutions. I just, if somebody wants to give us the unlimited pen test time budget, we'll go through and find everything.
We're always down for that, right? We always like that.
Yeah, but nobody takes us up on it. Something about it being expensive and return on investment.
That's not necessarily true, right? With the continuous pen testing, what we're doing, that is changing. But that's a select group of customers that are like, you know what? We just want you guys to try to hack into us literally all the time. And we have all these really, really smart people that are out there just trying to find new ways to break into all of the organizations all the time. By the way, I don't think Brad is presenting today on that. So we've got some stuff coming out. We'll talk more about that.
I do know he's got I think he's got a webcast or a minimum a blog post that's coming out.
Yeah, I might have been seeing the future webcast that's coming up. But just so people know, one of the things that Brad and I think Jordan, I can't remember who else was on that test.
Yeah, I was on that.
There's Jordan.
Okay, it was one of Jordan. Do you want to talk a little bit about the class of vulnerability that you discovered, because it is something kind of new? And if you could talk a little bit about,
I wouldn't say new, right? .NET has been around for 20 years now, John. So because it's a compiled language, it can also be decompiled, right? So when we look at DLL structures and find interesting things lying around domains and networks and look under the hood, I think Tim alluded to secure encryption algorithms. So if we talk about this class of vulnerabilities in that we find a config file, we're able to uncover passwords because the DLL structure allows us to review what's under the hood and
that's what I meant. That's what I meant by new. It's not like I said .NET showed up and this vulnerability showed up last week. I meant as far as I can tell, we're one of the first groups of people that are writing tools around taking advantage of that insecure.
And it's terrifying ultimately. And anywhere you see these encryption algorithms like Drysdale, there is the possibility that we can uncover what's protected by Drysdale if the DLLs are laying around. And that's something we have started to look at explicitly now in our assumed compromise testing. We find DLLs that are interesting, or homegrown code, homegrown applications. We go look for those DLLs that are associated with it. And so what we found is there's some very scary things lying around, right? And ultimately, I think if we talk about this from the CVE perspective, these are 0 days. Let's be honest. We are finding 0 days in code now. The problem with this is that the 0 days we're finding are fourth party to us. We're working with a customer. We find a 0-day in a chunk of code. If that customer isn't willing to go to the vendor of the application whose code is vulnerable, we're on an island. There's nothing we can do with that.
And I think that kind of gets back to, it's kind of fun. Like, you talk about this as a problem, and this goes back to the problems that we were dealing with back in 2000 to 2005, 2006, maybe 2008 timeframe, right? Like, in that beginning of pen testing, we would find these vulnerabilities in a customer application, and we'd say, hey, this is vulnerable to this particular style of attack, whether it's format string buffer overflow, basic heap overflow, and like maybe structured exception handling, pop return type things, like really, really, really basic stuff. And the customer would be like, that's great. That's a vendor. Like, what do we do with this? I'm like, well, you got to talk to your vendor. And we get back into that problem. And we're seeing this again with some of our tests. Where back in the day, if we went to a vendor, the vendor would be like, we're going to sue you. Or they would immediately try to get you under a non-disclosure agreement, because the problem wasn't the vulnerability. The problem was somebody finding out about the vulnerability. That's all the vendors were caring about. And we're kind of seeing that same thing now. And it's weird to see that kind of echo back to where we go to the customer's like, holy crap, this seems like a problem. We're like, yes, it is. What do we do about it? Go talk to the vendor. And the vendor's like, well, I don't see any Metasploit module for this. Is this actually an issue? Or we've had some of the vendors talk to us. They're like, that seems really freaking complicated. I don't think a general hacker is going to go through the level of effort that BHIS did on this engagement. And I think that that's part of the reason with the blog and the webcast that's coming up from Brad. Like, we're going to be releasing tools that help pen testers identify this vulnerability in dynamic link libraries, and we can kind of get some more exposure to it. But that once again goes right back to what Tim was talking about. I feel if you're in this space, and you're doing security research, I think there's so many security researchers that are right on the cutting edge of what the vulnerability space is, like what all the cool kids are doing. There's so much, just go back in time and start re-looking at some of these things. And there's so many things, there's so many Easter eggs that we missed. And I think that there's an amazing career for security researchers to find some old school vulnerabilities like this that they're just haven't been fixed.
We have a full agenda today, so you're already here for our pre-show banter. We have our first talk coming up in about 4 minutes with Matthias. And then, as you can see, we have this whole schedule laid out. Very excited for everybody joining us, from Roman, Kevin Johnson, Miran, Jordan. And then, of course, at the end of the day at 3:15 Eastern time, you can join us again for a panel. We'll have some of the same people you see here on this panel right now joining us again to talk more about secure code and hacking all of the things. I want to give a special shout out to today's sponsor, Barricade Cyber Solutions. Thank you, Eric Taylor and the whole gang over at Barricade Cyber Solutions for sponsoring us all the time, for whether it's our conferences like Wild West Hacking Fest or our summits that we do. We appreciate their support as always. And then, of course, we are Antisyphon Training. We are powered by Black Hills Information Security. Now, if you're not familiar with Black Hills Information Security, which I'm pretty sure a lot of you are, we do a lot of different services, consulting. We have an active SOC and anti-SOC, which is the continuous pen testing that we talked about earlier. And of course, we have penetration testing services, incident response, and we are here to help you with all of your security needs. So please be sure to reach out. And I know we have a new AI service coming up soon, which I'm very excited about, with from Joff and Derek. So stay tuned for that, because that'll be coming up. And of course, Antisyphon Training. We have live training, on-demand training. Whether you're an individual or a team, we have training that is accessible and ready for you. So if you are looking for anything cybersecurity related, whether it's red team, blue team, purple team, and even foundations, we've got you covered. So if you need any type of training, have any questions about training, please be sure to reach out. We have over 60 classes in our platform right now and more on the way, which is super exciting. And then, if you guys don't know, we have Wild West Hackin' Fest in Denver coming up. So Wild West Hackin' Fest, Mile High, Denver, in February of 2025. So if you are looking for any pre-con training, we'll have that training running on February 4th and 5th. And the conference is going to be running from February 5th through the 7th. We have virtual tickets available. And then, of course, we are all going to be, well, most of us are going to be there in person, and we'd really love to see you there. So hope you can all make it out to Denver next year and join us. It's going to be a lot of fun. I want to give this quick announcement because we are going to be going through some changes with Discord. So if you guys are part of the Antisyphon Discord server, we are going to be transitioning and converging our Discord servers. So we're going to be taking our Antisyphon Discord server and merging that with our Black Hills Information Security Discord server. And that's for a few reasons, but it's really because we're one community and we want us all to be together. We want the community to all come together to help each other out as much as possible. So starting off in the next year in 2025, you'll be seeing some changes here with Discord where we'll eventually kind of close down Antisyphon Discord, but we'll have our Black Hills server available for Antisyphon and BHIS, of course. But it's, we want to bring the community together. We'll have more resources and more help so we can make the community better. So be sure to pay attention because we'll have a lot more information coming out about that. I'm very excited about that. And then if you have any questions about anything that's coming up, you can always go to poweredbybhs.com and that'll let you know everything that is happening here at Black Hills Antisyphon Training, Active Countermeasures, Wild West Hackin' Fest, RECA, list goes on and on. And I am done with my slides, and we're going to get over to Matthias because we're a little bit over here. So,
all right, let's get going. See you all in a bit.